This is a story that comes from Africa, Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters by John Steptoe. It was just selected to be a Caldecott honor book for the beautiful pictures. And the story goes like this. A long time ago in Africa, in a little village, about half a day's journey from a big city, there lived a man named Mufaro, and he had two daughters named Nyasha and Manyara. And everyone agreed that both his daughters were very beautiful. But Manyara was always angry. She was always bothering her sister Nyasha. She would always say to Nyasha, "One day I will be the queen and you will be a servant in my palace." And Nyasha said, "I would be glad to serve you, but why are you always so angry? You were so beautiful and clever and strong. There is no need for you to be angry." And Manyara said, "Everyone talks about you, about how kind you are, about how good you are. Father must love you best, but one day when I am queen, everyone will see that your kindness is only weakness." Now Mufaro did not know that Manyara plagued Nyasha that way. When he was there, Manyara was always kind to Nyasha, and Nyasha never told her father how her sister tormented her. Now Nyasha had a garden of her very own, and there she grew vegetables and sunflowers and millet and yams. And every day, as she was tending the garden, she would sing, and people said that it was her singing which made the vegetables and the sunflowers grow so beautifully. One day, when Nyasha was in her garden, she saw a little garden snake. It was green. She said, "Oh, Nyoka, you can stay in my garden. You will keep the other creatures away. Any time you want to come and live in my garden, you are welcome." And she patted the snake on the head. And every day Nyoka came to the garden, and Nyasha sang more beautifully than ever. Mufaro was very proud of his two daughters. And one day, a messenger came from the great city where the king lived. And the king had sent out the word that he was looking for a wife, and everyone should bring their most worthy and most beautiful daughters to the city so that he could choose. And Manyara said, "Oh, father, I think that if Nyasha leaves you, she would be so sad she would grieve forever. It would be better if Nyasha stayed here with you, and I will go to the city alone." But Mufaro said, "No, Manyara. The message from the king said all beautiful and worthy daughters should come. I will bring both of you to the city. I will let the king decide." So Mufaro gathered many of the people in his village the next day to accompany him with his 2 daughters to the great king's city. But Manyara could not wait. She decided she must go to the city first. So in the middle of the night, she crept out of her bed and out of her hut and went into the jungle by herself. It was very dark. She could hear birds calling. She could hear animals hunting. As she ran through the jungle, she ran into a little boy. And the boy said, "Oh, please give me something to eat. I'm so very hungry." "No," said Manyara, "I just brought enough food for myself." "Please," said the boy, "I am so hungry." "No," said Manyara. "Besides, tomorrow I will be your queen, and you must not bother me anymore." So she left the little boy crying in his hunger. She went on a little farther, and in the middle of some bushes, she met an old woman. And the old woman said, "Ah, Manyara, I have a warning for you. Not far from here you will come to a grove of trees, and they will be laughing at you. Take care that you do not laugh back. And farther on the top of a little hill, you will meet a man carrying his head under his arm. Be very polite to him." "How do you know my name is Manyara?" said the girl. "Do not bother me, old woman, with your foolish tales, for tomorrow I shall be your queen." And Manyara went off to the jungle. And sure enough, not far from there, she came to a grove of tall trees. And the trees were laughing at her. And she stood there and she said, "I am not afraid of you trees. I laugh back at you. Ha!" And she went on. And then she came to the top of a hill. And there she saw the man with his head under his arm. She ran by him quickly. She did not speak to him. She certainly was not polite to him. And she went on until she came to the city just at dawn. Back in the village, when Mufaro woke up, he could not find Manyara anywhere. So they searched for a trace of the girl, and they found her trail led into the jungle. So there was nothing to do but to start the journey towards the city as they had planned. Nyasha was very excited. She looked about everything in her hut and knew that she would never see it again in quite the same way. They went out in a great procession, Mufaro and Nyasha at the head, and all of the people of the village coming along behind them. And they met the little boy. And Nyasha went up to him and she said, "Oh, you must be hungry. Here, have a yam to eat." And the boy took the yam and thanked Nyasha. And a little farther on, where the 2 paths came together, there was the old woman, and she pointed the way to the city. And Nyasha thanked her and gave her a little bag of sunflower seeds. They went on up and up the hill, and at the top of the hill down in the valley, Nyasha could see the beautiful city shining. She knew that her destiny lay there. Well, Mufaro and Nyasha and all of their friends came to the gates of the great city, and they went inside the gates. And there, running, they met Manyara. "Stop," stop, she said. This is a terrible place. I have just been in a chamber in the heart of the city, and there I met a monster, a terrible snake with 5 heads. And he said he knew all of my faults, and I displeased him. I had to run away, or he would have eaten me. Oh, Nyasha, do not go in there. Nyasha comforted her sister, and then she handed Manyara over to the father to take care of. For Nyasha knew that her destiny lay in that central chamber. They went to the door, and Nyasha opened the door by herself and walked inside. And there, on the king's stool, was the little green garden snake. "Oh," said Nyasha, "Nyoka, whatever are you doing here?" "This is where I live," said the snake. And as Nyasha watched, the snake changed into a tall, handsome king. And he said, "I was also the little boy and the old woman, and you are kind to all of us. And Nyasha, you are truly the most beautiful and worthy daughter, and I would be honored if you would be my wife." And long ago in Africa, Nyasha said yes. And the mother and sisters of the king made her ready for a beautiful wedding. And when all was ready, the king and Nyasha were married. And Mufaro said, "I am the most blessed of men, for I have 2 beautiful and worthy daughters, Nyasha the queen, and Manyara, a worthy servant in her palace." Now I'd like to show you a little bit about the book. Some of those words, some of those names have very special meanings. Mufaro means happy man, and Nyasha means mercy. Manyara means ashamed, and Nyoka means snake. And I want to show you some of these pictures. Here is Mufaro with his 2 daughters. This one is Manyara, and this is Nyasha. And this picture here of the 2 girls shows how calm and peaceful Nyasha always is. And this is where Manyara was very angry with her. And even though Manyara is a very beautiful girl, when she's mean and angry, she doesn't look so pretty. And this is the king that Nyasha married. And here is the beautiful wedding when they all lived happily ever after. Well, that is a beautiful African story, and many of the African stories came over here when the Africans were brought over in the slave ships. And this is a story that they told about how all the animals got on the earth. Now, a long time ago, there weren't no animals down here on the earth. All the animals, they live way up in the sky. They live right next door to Sister Moon. Oh, Sister Moon was so pretty. Every night, them animals would just sit on the porch and they'd look at Sister Moon, who was just lovely. But they started noticing that Sister Moon was getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. You would have thought she'd been on a cottage cheese diet. Well, so Brer Rabbit, he says, I'm going to go talk to Sister Moon. And he says, Sister Moon, you sure is looking puny. You all right? You look worse than Job's old turkey. Oh, says Sister Moon, I was feeling kind of poorly. I need some rest. I needs to go away and get strong. I needs to go where the shadows is to get more light. Now, down on earth, Mr. Man, he will be so scared if he looks up in the sky at night and I's not there. Now, Brer Rabbit, do you think you could go down to Mr. Man on the earth and tell him that I's weak and I's going away to get strong and I's going into the shadows to get more light? So Brer Rabbit, he repeats that. I was getting weak, so I was going away to get strong. I was going into the shadows to get more light. All right, Sister Moon, he says, I will do that. So Brer Rabbit, he jump down from the sky down to the earth. And he looks around and he sees the stars and he sees the firmament and his eyes just popped out of his head. And that's why to this very day, rabbits has eyes that sort of pops out of their head. And he falls down and down and down till he land on earth. And there's Mr. Man. And what's even better, there's Mr. Man's garden. And there's peas and string beans and cabbage and lettuce and all sorts of good things to eat. And there's also some cows and pigs and chickens. I know I said all the animals is up there in the sky, but Mr. Man, he seemed to have some of them down there on earth. So Brer Rabbit, he goes up, he says, Mr. Man, I got a message for you from Sister Moon. She say she's weak and she can't get strong and she's going where the shadows are. And Mr. Man said, well, you just tell Sister Moon that when she goes away, I'll forget about her. And if she dies, her feet gets cold. All right, says Brer Rabbit, I'll tell her that. So Brer Rabbit, he jump up again and he jump way back up to the sky. And he says to Sister Moon, he says, I told Mr. Man what you said. And he says that he's going to forget you. And ooh, Sister Moon, she gets so angry. She takes her shovel and she just hits Brer Rabbit and she splits his lip. Well, now, Brer Rabbit, he's not going to take that from anybody, not even Sister Moon. So he starts fighting her and he's scratching her. And you know, to this very day, they're rabbits, they have a split lip. Have you seen the moon? It looks like somebody's been scratching at it. Well, Brer Rabbit, he told all them other animals about the land down there on earth where Mr. Man lives. And they all thought that garden sounded pretty good. So all the animals is up in the sky, they all jumped down, down, down. And that's how all the animals got down here on earth. Now that's just one of the stories that is from the Uncle Remus collection of stories. Now, you know a lot of the characters in the Uncle Remus stories. Of course, the most famous one there is Brer Rabbit. But there's lots of stories also about Brer Fox and Brer Bear and Brer Wolf and Brer Terrapin, which means turtle. Now, there's a new book that I got that story from called Tales of Uncle Remus, The Adventures of Brer Rabbit, and that was as retold by Julius Lester. Now, I would like to tell you another story. This is not about Brer Rabbit. As a matter of fact, it is about Brer Fox, but it's a different Brer Fox. It's not the one that talks to Brer Rabbit. This fox talks to a little girl named Flossie. Now, I'm sure you all know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, right? And you all know how she met the wolf in the woods. Well, I always thought that Little Red Riding Hood was just about one of the dumbest little girls I ever heard of. That's why I really like this story about Flossie, because Flossie is anything but dumb. Flossie Finley lived a long time ago down south, and she had a little straw doll, and one day she's sitting in a swing, and she's swinging back and forth, and oh, it was so hot. It was really hot for an August afternoon down there in Tennessee. Flossie! She hears Big Mama calling her. Coming, Big Mama, says Flossie, and she goes over to see her grandma. Now, her grandma's sorting peaches, and she says, Flossie, honey, I got a job for you. See, I got this basket of eggs here. Now, I would like you to take these eggs to Ms. Viola, you know, who lives over in the quarters in the McCutcheon place. There's been a fox, and that fox has been troubling her chickens something terrible. Her chickens won't even lay a stone now. Well, says Flossie, how come Mr. J.W. McCutcheon's hound dogs can't catch that fox? Ho-ho, says Big Mama. That fox is such a sly trickster. Well, them hound dogs just can't catch him nohow. Now, you be real careful, these eggs. Well, now, you know, Big Mama, says Flossie, I disremember what a fox doesn't look like. And Big Mama says, child, a fox be just a fox. Now, don't you tarry none on your way to Miss Viola's. I won't, Big Mama, says Flossie. So she takes that basket of eggs, and she starts down the road a piece, but oh, it's so hot. And the woods is cooler, and the woods is quicker. So Flossie starts towards the woods. And she thinks, oh, what if I meet a fox in there? Oh, well, she says, a fox be just a fox. That ain't so scary. So she goes in the woods. And she hadn't skipped down into the woods very far till she sees a critter sitting there. And he says, top of the morning, little missy. And who might you be? And Flossie says real polite, Flossie Finley. And she curtsies and she says, and who are you? And the critter says, I am a fox. And Flossie looks at him real hard. She rocks forward on her toes and back on her heels, and forward on her toes and back on her heels. And she says, nope, I don't believe it. You don't believe what? I don't believe you're a fox. Well, I told you I am a fox, he says, and you should be positively terrified of me. What on earth are they teaching children these days? You sure do think a heap of yourself, says Flossie. And she skips on through the woods. And the fox, he goes after her and he says, you mean I have to prove to you I'm a fox before you'll be afraid of me? You sure do, she says. Well, he says, I can prove I'm a fox. Foxes are known by their long, luxurious fur. So feel my fur. So Flossie, she pets the fox and she feels his fur and she says, oh, feels like rabbit to me. You must be a rabbit, just saying you're a fox. No, he says, I'm a fox, I tell you. I don't believe it, says Flossie. And she goes on and she comes to a little water spring and she bends down and gets herself a drink, and then she sits there picking some wildflowers, and the fox, he come up and he said, I can prove it. Foxes have long, pointy noses. See, I have a long, pointy nose. Flossie looks at him, she says, so does a rat. That's it, you a rat, passing yourself off as a fox. No, says the fox, I'm a fox, I tell you. What else can I do to prove it? And Flossie gets up, she walks along swinging the basket of eggs, and there on a little piece of wood, there's a cat sitting. Hi, pretty kitty, says Flossie, and she pats the cat on top of the head. And the fox says, if you don't believe I'm a fox, ask that fine feline creature you seem to have such regard for. And the cat says, this is a fox. Has sharp claws and yellow eyes. Well, so do you, Miss Cat, says Flossie. Don't prove nothing except you both be cats. And she goes walking on. And the fox says, listen, I'll tell you what. See my long, bushy tail? You know a fox has a long, bushy tail. Yes, it does, says Flossie, but so's a squirrel. See that squirrel hopping up there? He's got a long, bushy tail, too. No, says the fox. Why won't you believe me? Now Flossie is out of the woods. And over across the field, she can see Miss Viola's cabin. And the fox says, please, won't you give me one last chance to prove I'm a fox? Okay, says Flossie. See, I have sharp teeth, and I can run very fast. Well, says Flossie, now I don't think it matters anymore what I think, because right over there is one of Mr. McCutcheon's hound dogs, and he's got sharp teeth, and he can run real fast. Ah, says the fox, the hound knows who I am, and I can outrun and outsmart any one of Mr. J.W. McCutcheon's mutts, and he takes off to the woods. I'm a fox, I told you. And Flossie says, I know. And she takes her basket of eggs and goes off to Miss Viola's house. And that's the story of Flossie and the Fox by Patricia McKissick with pictures by Rachel Isadora. And there's a picture of Flossie talking to the fox. And there she is with her grandma. There she's going down the road. And there's that old fox. And there she's petting him. And he's showing her how he has a pointy nose like a rat. And there's the cat that also has sharp claws and yellow eyes. And there's the squirrel. And there, at last, is triumphant Flossie, who has outfoxed the fox.